Hey guys, this is Jay. I am going to take you through my micronutrient fasting plan. I started this, I'm actually 5 weeks into it, so I'm going to do this a little Quentin Tarantino style, starting not quite from the end, but near the end, and then kind of go to the beginning, and then I'll publish some of my vlogs as I go along, and then wrap up with the picture. So that's why I'm not showing you my face today, not because I just don't like to show my face or anything, but I want to keep it a little bit of a mystery. But tomorrow I'll go ahead and post the next video on my first day and what I'm trying to accomplish, and kind of take you through the whole journey as I go along. But I wanted to give you some context on how I'm going about this, why I'm going about this, what I am doing, what I'm not doing, all the rest of this stuff. So we're not quite starting from the end, but we're starting close. We'll piece together the whole picture, and hopefully by the end wrap it up like Pulp Fiction and show what happens after the fact. Okay, so on to the first slide, and I'm going to warn you, this is going to be a little bit boring, a little bit dry by comparison. It'll probably go for 20, 30, 40 minutes. I tend to go long. I think it was Guy Kawasaki that said, you don't want to go long and suck. Because you could do either one, but he goes, unfortunately tech guys, which is my background, tend to do both at the same time. I'm going to do a little bit of a light treatment. I've kept a lot of links in here so you can do your own research. There's a ton of material in here. If I start to go too long, I'll break it up into two presentations and post them back to back. Here we go. So micronutrient and or water fasting. This is my standard warning. I don't want to read from the slides here. You can read it as we're going along. The water fasting in particular, when I started to research this, I saw a lot of stories where people had died, or people had complications, or things like that, or people that were doing water fasting were successful, had electrolyte balance, or they were getting symptoms where they didn't know it was electrolyte balance. They just said, oh yeah, my body just had sudden jolts, and it just seemed like the wrong way to do it. I really wanted to head off the possibility of having those side effects. So I decided to go with micronutrient fasting, which is essentially water fasting plus some supplements, and I'll go into detail on what those are. Don't do this if you're under 18 or under actually, and I think that's the general recommendation by any medical doctor out there. These things that I'm going to go through today are discussion points. Go to your doctor, talk to your doctor, see what he thinks. Certainly I'm doing a little bit of an extreme fast. There's different versions of this, so make sure you're tied in with your doctor, get your blood work done, get a physical, ask him, how far should you go into it. Pregnant women, also not recommended. Underweight, this isn't about anorexia, and I think Dr. Jason Fung, who wrote the Obesity Code and wrote the Guide to Fasting, says he deals with overweight diabetic patients. So anorexia nervosis isn't something he actually has an issue that he deals with. He goes like number 1,000 on my list. So if you're underweight, this isn't for you either. Dangerous comorbid conditions, diabetes, congestive heart failure, COPD, all these things have very specific medications and treatments that you need to work on. And I think it's important that you understand with your doctor what the net effect is, particularly if you're taking blood sugar medication, you're taking stuff for blood pressure. These are going to change as you lose weight, as you diet, as you dump insulin out of your system. Your doctor's going to have to monitor your blood sugar and make adjustments to your medication as you go along. You need to be extra careful. I'm not a doctor. I do a lot of research. I work in the medical field, but on the software side for years, but that does not make me qualified to tell you how you should or shouldn't diet. I'm just doing this from my perspective. You can learn from my mistakes and my successes. You can take that to your doctor and say, is this the right approach for me? Should I modify it, etc.? Have your doctor provide your checkpoints and modification to your medical history. It's should you check in every week? He'll tell you should check in every 3 weeks. You should be measuring your blood sugar daily, whatever he has you on. And finally, this is a bit of a disclaimer, but my results are my results. I honestly don't know what typical is. I've seen people do water fast and lose 50 pounds in 28 days. I've seen people do 43 pounds. I've seen people try water fasting and fail at it miserably. It just depends on who they are, how old they are, what their BMR is, how active they are. I don't even know what normal for you would be. So I wouldn't take this as, hey, I can expect these same results. Here we go. I hate this picture. I just despise it. I can't believe I got there. You can see my biggest weight there in the middle was 355.8, and that's where I started a couple years ago actually. And I'm going to take you through again little mid parts of the story and kind of take you through what I went through, kind of even getting to this point. On the left, that's my biggest suit, and you can see I can barely, I can't even put them together, and that's my biggest shirt, I think a size 20 neck. And then I decided, hey, I'm going to change things. I took some before pictures and I decided to go after, and I went from 355 down to like 325 from my highest ever over about 2 years. And really I just kind of didn't eat quite as much. I did a little exercise there, would diet for a few weeks and then quit and move on from that. Let's take a look at next slide here. All right, I finally got down to January 8th of this year. I call this a New Year's resolution. The first pic you saw there was January 6th of 2016. I actually had dropped down to 320.6. I'd hit 325, but I went on vacation and actually had eaten for 4 or 5 days straight, just 3 meals a day, no snacks in between, stuff that kind of what Dr. Fung talks about doing. Here's all my stats, chest of 55, waist of 56, hips of 51. You can read all the rest of them. I'm not going to go through there. I can't explain exactly how I lost the weight and got to 320.6. I do know that last 4 or 5 pounds was adhering to some of the advice in Dr. Fung's book. Here's where I'm starting. You get the preview of what I'm doing. The videos will start from this day and move forward. This actually isn't my picture on the left now that I look at it. So I'll show you that picture here in just a little bit. That's that picture you saw before. Okay, here's the actual picture. See, I got tricky with PowerPoint and had fade-ins and everything else. So this is from that previous picture that you saw here to this picture is that 355 to 320.6. And you can see lost a little bit weight. My face is a little thinner, a little bit, I'll call it leaner, less fat is probably the right term. Here we go. All right, my inspiration. I read Dr. Fung's book prior to going on vacation. I limited myself to very little snacks. Normally I'll grab a snack during the day when I get bored. I lost 4 pounds. I didn't try, I wasn't hungry. I just had a really easy time of dropping that 4 pounds. And the other part that I had come in was I had a very fast cataracts growing in my, I think it was my right eye, no, my left eye, I'm sorry. And so I've had to have cataract surgery, which removes your lens permanently, and both eyes had it. One was worse than the other. But essentially that's a permanent loss surgery, and I think that's the first time I've ever had that happen to myself. It's like, okay, this is done, I can never go back. That was it. I was really disappointed, the fact that I had finally got to that point. The obesity code from Dr. Fung is really at the core of everything. He also wrote a book, The Complete Guide to Fasting. I would suggest if you're going to go into this with some knowledge base, I'll give you some of the high level points out of it, but if you're going to go into this knowledge base, you need to really spend some time here and learn this. I think it's much better to read this than to listen to what I have to say about it. Tons of studies, tons of science, not just someone on YouTube saying, oh, do this, do that, and there's not really any studies to back that up. The other part of this research that I did was based on the Nobel Prize in Medicine from Dr. Yoshinori Oshumi. Hopefully I didn't butcher that too badly. His Nobel Prize work in medicine for mechanisms of autophagy. And autophagy is essentially the ability to eat bad cells. And when your body goes into ketosis and it begins to reuse your cells, it takes the bad parts, takes the cells in, strips out the bad parts, keeps the good parts, discards the bad parts, and rebuilds from that perspective. And he did some study on yeast, he did some genetic engineering. He kind of proved that that was really behind what happens during fasting state. It also inspired my scientific study approach to weight loss. I took all the information that was out there, and misinformation and augmented information and half-truths and full truths, and tried to find the studies that supported them. And if I couldn't find the studies, or I found studies that were counter to them, I threw that stuff out. I really wanted to eliminate those common statements like you have to eat every 2 hours in order to maintain your metabolism, and if you go on fasting, your BMR drops to 40% of what it was before when you started. And there's just so many myths and so many information out there. I recommend you do the same thing. I've provided the links to a lot of the studies I have. Dr. Fung's 2 books provide tons of research on the studies that they have. Read through them. If you see something that disagrees, post it here. I'd love to see some studies that go contrary to what I have. One of the great truisms that I think I found in this is I don't think every diet works for every person. In fact, a lot of diets fail. So I think it's important that you look at, is this working for me? Is it making it easier? Is it making it harder? Can I endorse it long term? And I have some long-term strategy for this. This fast was a kickstart for me. It's not necessarily my long-term strategy, although I will probably use this tool probably less aggressively the rest of my life to kind of get back or make some progress where I want to make some progress. But take a scientific approach. Read Dr. Oshumi's work. It's pretty fascinating stuff of what he was able to accomplish. So I gave you a couple reasons that I had before. My highest body weight that I ever hit, I had for cataract surgery. I had to go in and take kind of a basic physical. I was kind of scared that I just wasn't going to pass the physical and they weren't going to let me do the surgery for cataracts. My blood pressure did hit 149/99. It actually had been reading high the last couple times I went into the doctor. My wife also has a surgeon, and she went to see him. She was looking at him and said, "Wow, you've lost a tremendous amount of weight. What are you doing?" And he's the one that suggested Dr. Fung's book to us. And he said, when I researched it, everything he said seemed wrong to me. He goes, in fact, it kind of pissed me off. I went out, I found the research, I analyzed it myself, and I said, this has got to be wrong. I'm going to prove this guy that he's wrong and it doesn't work. And he found out that the guy actually was right. He started doing it, and he said it was the easiest weight he had ever lost and made it very easy for him to maintain. Now he's doing, things like eliminating the sugars and the carbs and doing intermittent fasting from time to time. I don't believe, but I never really asked him whether he's doing a full-time fast or whether he did a longer term fast, but really it wasn't that important to me. I think this was something that I needed to do for myself. My family history, my dad had all kinds of issues. He just passed away last year. Diabetes, he was on 22 different medications. My mom had macular degeneration, diabetes, cancer in the colon. My whole family has some really bad medical genes. My daughter's actually adopted. She goes, I was wondering what I would look like if it came for you. And I go, trust me, you got the better genetics as a result of not being my biological child. But she definitely is the love of my life. Anyway, some other stuff that I saw, David Sinclair, the proteins identified in the production of sirtuins, I think that's the right pronunciation, which are responsible for DNA repair. I think that's part of Oshumi's work. Also, the professor of neuroscience, Mark Mattson, shows that it actually promotes growth of new neurons and connections in the brain. This is linked to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all the rest of that kind of stuff. Google these guys. Don't trust I've listed a whole bunch of stuff down at the bottom from NIH, National Institute of Health. And also when I get to the supplements section, their vitamin division, I'll remember the name when I see the slide. That's why I write slides, because my memory over 50 doesn't hold as good as what it used to be. But Mark Mattson has tons of interesting research. David Sinclair, I think if I covered this material could be days long. So suffice to say, check these out, take a look at them. Fascinating stuff. What did I try before? Ups and downs. Eat less, move more was almost always there since, 16 years old. I think I was overweight when I was 12. I think 12 to 13 is where I started to gain enough weight that it was noticeable, and I looked around and the other kids were skinnier. And you didn't have as many obese kids back then, so it stood out in the 70s pretty easily. The Biggest Loser study, after 6 years, they brought 14 of the contestants back in. Danny Cahill was burning 800 less calories per day than previously. The Women's Health Initiative, and these two studies are really key, 50,000 women, and there's another one that did 65,000 people over 7 years, that the low-fat, low-calorie diets reduced by 361 calories, increased their exercise by 14%. The other group just did whatever they normally do, and literally less than 2 pounds different in the group waist went up instead of down. So I think there's pretty significant science that the eat less, move more just doesn't work like it's advertised to do. And especially if you're really big and trying to move down, an 800 calorie deficit in your metabolism is impossible to overcome. I did Atkins back in the 70s before it became keto, before it came, paleo, all the rest of these things that went in. I did lean cuisine. The lean cuisine diet was, I just picked up a bunch of lean cuisine meals and ate 4 of those a day, spread them out, enough times to eat evenly during the 4. Ran like crazy. I actually was doing probably 3 to 5 miles every other day. I did lose a lot of weight. I really did. I dropped down, I think, to 205, which was my lowest a long time since maybe college. And felt great and everything else. I just couldn't keep it up. You just can't eat lean cuisines the rest of your life, no matter how quote-unquote good they are. I did liquid diets. I've always run or lifted. If I want to start lose weight, that's like the first thing that I start doing. I actually tried pure water fasting, and I found I was dizzy and I was extremely hungry, and I failed at it a couple times going into it. But it was good for me to start small and see what it was like, and I adjusted things appropriately. And I think if you're going to get into this, try 1 meal a day, try intermittent fasting, try starting small the first time, try a 3-day fast if you're going to do it, and see if that works for you. But these are some of the things I've done before. I've done probably dozens more than just these, be it Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, Nutrisystem, etc. But they just they either don't work in the first place, or work for a few weeks and then fail, or work for a little while longer and then I just can't keep them up long term. Okay, where I had to start was at dispelling a lot of myths, because like my wife's doctor, a lot of this stuff seemed very foreign to me. The eat less, move more is the mantra that you've heard for decades, and it's the every P90X, every Weight Watchers, every whatever it may be, is based on this. And so doing the studies, and I recommend reading Fung's book. He goes into a lot more detail. Again, I'm not going to go into all that detail here because it would be too long, but his main point is that insulin is at the root of all weight gain. And even heavy carbs, fruit, diet drinks, they're going to trigger insulin response within your system, and you're not going to be able to process all your foods to the liver, and it gets stored as fat. Now, one of the big myths that happens there is that fasting or intermittent fasting is going to ruin your metabolism. They actually go so far as to say you're going to lose a 1/4 pound of muscle for every day you fast, which is just simply not true. There's not a single study that supports that whole thing. Now, you're always going to lose some lean mass when you're on a diet or a fast, either one. And your lean mass is going to go down, but your fat's going to go down at a bigger ratio. So actually you're going to get quote-unquote leaner associated with your overall body weight. Now, they did an intermittent fasting group, and they had a 2.2% addition to the lean body mass compared to a reduced calorie and these were across a 32-week period, was 0.5%, almost 4 times more effective. I think it was funny, Dr. Fung had a quote that essentially said, storing fat is meant to be a survival mechanism, and it's there when you go through periods of less food or starvation. It goes and it burns the fat. That's how the system or the body's designed. Otherwise, it wouldn't store fat. And he said if your body just went and turned around and burnt muscle, he said that's like going in and chopping firewood for all winter long and stacking it in a pile next to you, and then the first sign that it gets cold, you go and you burn the furniture. He said it just makes no sense whatsoever, and we know the body's designed to do this. It's really silly to see some of these myths that are out there. It's the body is built to handle periods of food. For thousands of years, we've gone through points where there is no food. Agriculture wasn't necessarily around to kind of fill the gaps between those two. They'll say that long-term fasting doesn't lower metabolism. I think it does a little. I think there's not enough science behind this to make a call one way or another. So I'm going to go with it's going to lower metabolism after 72 hours or so. Intermittent fasting up to 72 hours, it actually increases your metabolism. Again, tons of studies in Fung's book and elsewhere on the internet that you can look at. If you really want a good overview of fasting, this link to this YouTube video that I have here is Dr. Fung being interviewed by someone, and he covers a ton of this material. So check that out and see what you think of that. Now, if you take a look at, I think this is based on Dr. McHugh's work here, when you start to go into days of fasting and you have carbohydrates in your system, and it's going to burn those, it's going to turn that glucose into energy, it's going to do its normal process. But as you begin to fast, you run out of that immediate energy. It doesn't last very long, and it begins to drop to next to zero. If you look at the proteins, there's a little spike in there that happens, but again, it also drops to 250 calories, and you could see the amount of fat that you burn goes up, and then you see an associated drop with what your metabolism is. So the work by Dr. McHugh, and I don't have a link here, I'll maybe post it in the comments down below on YouTube, is a great place to look at some of the research that he's done. And here I am violating Dr. I don't even know he's the doctor, I'm calling everybody doctor, Guy Kawasaki's advice of going long. Hopefully I'm not sucking, but I am going long. So I think I'm going to divide this into two different sections. So let me cover my approach, then I'll break the video here, and then I'll go into part 2 of the video that I'll post the next day so you can see more of the details in there. My approach: nutrients and a combination of certain tablets. Sodium in particular, I think that's a big mistake of water fasting. I see a lot of people get depleted of sodium, potassium, and it's something that I think is a problem. I'm also going to do apple cider vinegar, and I'll go through all the benefits of these and what each tablet is and everything else. I borrowed the documentation approach and some of the information from a YouTube channel called The Fasting Journal, and the guy's name's Dave. I don't think he ever gave his last name, but there's the link to his site if you want to check it out. You'll see a chart that I do for weight loss that looks very similar to his. Excellent channel, lots of detail. I only posted 4 or 5 videos, but it's a good place to start. I'm going to exercise. I'm doing walking 30 minutes a day for just the benefits of walking. It's not about raising my metabolism or anything else. I also did the stairs 10 times a day just to kind of work out my legs and get my legs are a major muscle group in your system, to get those activated. I did start off not lifting, but I ended up lifting 3 to 4 times a week to kind of help minimize muscle loss and keep those engaged. When I come off and break my fast, I'm going to do even more of that to build the muscle. My wife is on 1 meal a day, and she actually was down 6 pounds. And since this slide was done, she's shifted to intermittent fasting, where she's going 24 or 48 hours between meals, and she's down, I believe, another 4 or 5 pounds. So I'm going to pay attention to what she's doing very closely, and that may be where I exit the fast, is into some system like that. The big thing that I wanted to do is identify my food-related habits, and I'll give you one up front. I'll sit at my desk about 10 o'clock, I'll get bored, I'm tired of sitting at a computer, my back hurts a little bit, I get up and get away, and it's really about being bored, and it's really about getting a break from sitting in front of my computer. But I always went to the kitchen pantry, grabbed some kind of snack cake or something, ate it, walked around, got unbored, and then headed back to my desk. And fasting will point out to you faster than anything where you have these automated habits, and I really wanted to work on identifying those, understanding why, and replacing them. I also wanted to set short-term goals on a few day boundaries. So whether it was, I'm going to get to the next 10 pounds in 3 more pounds, I'm going to fit into this old pair of clothes that I have, I'm only 3 days out from the end of the week. And right now I'm only 7 days out. So I'm positive I'm going to make it to the end of the 7 days because I've done 35 days already. And I've got to see it through to the end. But these short-term goals help you get through those periods where you only lose 0.2 or 0.6 or 0.1 pounds, and they keep you engaged during that whole thing. And I find fasting, and I was hoping this was going to be true, and it certainly has been true, fasting over food diets works much better for me. The all or nothing nature of fasting means if I'm eating 3 meals a day, I see something I like, I go, well, I'll just eat that, and then I'll make it up in the next meal. And that temptation to break your fast, or not even break your fast, but just eat outside your meal plan is much, much harder to deal with when you're eating on a regular basis. And the fasting is, gosh, I'm 15 days into it. There's no way I'm touching that Hostess cupcake or whatever. And really the final part of this is getting into ketosis, that pure fat burning state, and taking advantages of the benefits of autophagy were top on my list. Those were really the approach that I was going to take into the system, and I'll let you see over the next, gosh, I don't do a video every day, so I imagine you'll catch up to me in about 3 weeks, because there's sometimes where I skip 2-3 days and don't do a video, and I post one video. So as I post these on a daily basis, you're going to kind of catch up to my current state, and you should arrive maybe a week into when I'm breaking my fast and refeeding and doing all the rest of that kind of stuff.